Welcome back to another episode with the Grapevine. My name is Susan.
I'm Sherry.
I'm Susie.
And we are back for a second part of a two-part series that we did with Linda Riley. I'm going to introduce her. She's a marriage and family therapist in Winter Park, Florida, and she's had over 35 years of clinical experience. Thanks for being with us again.
I'm happy to do it.
So we had so many questions, we actually couldn't finish them all on the first half. So we wanted to really continue that conversation about husbands and wives and communication skills and take it back even a little bit further with really what is your take on dating and making sure you get to know the person before you get married?
Well, that's a big question because dating is really messed up, in the world today. It's really sad what's happening in the world today, because the idea is, I believe the way God designed us was that we would connect emotionally with someone first, and then sexual desire would flow from that. When we really felt like we met someone, we get to know them, and then we start feeling that sense of he or she really gets me. Mm-hmm. And then you have the sexual attraction. And of course, when you look at the culture today, it's not done like that at all. It's immediate sexual involvement, which really stifles the couple from really getting to know each other on deeper levels. Mm-hmm. Because once that happens, that relationship quickly becomes about the sex and not about getting to know one another. So I think dating is really important. I don't know if you're wanting me to speak about young people or just maybe college girls or young, everybody's dating nowadays because of divorce. So you've got all kinds of populations dating. And it can be quite startling for someone who came out of a long marriage. Maybe their partner died, or maybe they did go through the unpleasantness of a divorce. And then they're out in the dating world and with Christian values, and I hear all kinds of things. I don't just see Christians in my practice, and I've certainly heard men say, I wouldn't take a girl out the second time if she didn't have sex with me. And I think that the response to that is, you shouldn't want to go out a second time with a guy like that, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So when kids begin to date, first when they're, maybe senior in high school or college, I think it should be a little bit about forming friendships and learning how to socialize and relate to opposite sex. But I just am old-fashioned. I think that if you're going to do serious dating, you need to have figured out what's really important to you. And who are you looking for? Are you looking for just someone to have fun with? Or are you pass the time, or are you actually looking for possibly a life partner? And so many people of all ages say, I just want to have fun, I'm not serious, I don't want to look for a life partner. But the problem with that is, if you go out with people that, for instance, don't share your religious beliefs, or maybe a whole lot of your other values, and you think, I'm just having fun, I'm not going to marry them, what inevitably happens in a lot of cases is that you get emotionally invested. Mm-hmm. That's why God tells us in the Bible to guard our hearts and be careful who we allow ourselves to get emotionally connected to. So dating can be fun and superficial, but it also can be very serious, where you're really, what you're looking for, and you're praying about it, and you're interviewing the person that you go out with. Mm-hmm. And hopefully they're interviewing you. Hopefully they want to find out really who you are. I think it's really sad. There's that song that Frank Sinatra sings, let's take all the steps along the way, that song. I think it's sad that we really miss something when we don't take all the steps along the way.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you think for those who believe that dating should be just kept for when you're really serious and ready to start like a marriage relationship, right? Do you think that for parents who don't let their children date until an older age, do you think they're just setting them up for being secretive?
Well, I think it's important when friendships, going back to early high school, parents need to encourage same-sex friendships, and they need to help children realize that that's part of their development and learning how to really have friends and be a friend. And it's very important to do that. And some kids just fall into it. They're very social. They get a lot of friends naturally. But other kids really struggle there. And that's something parents don't want to ignore. If your child's having problems, then you need to step in and invite some kids over. Right, if your child isn't getting any invitations, invite some kids over to do some fun things, making sure they have fun. So I think then later, when they get older, it's a good thing to allow them to do sort of what's called group dating, where they go out in co-ed groups of friends, but you have to be careful when they tell you it's a group of friends, that this group hasn't divided into dyads or pairs, and they're presenting it, as a group of friends, because sometimes that can happen. But letting kids develop friendships with opposite sex, I think, is fine when they get to be older, because we do learn a lot from dating. We don't know at that young age exactly what we're looking for. Maybe our mother or father is kind of giving us some guidance, hopefully, but we don't really know. And so I think it is important to date, but you have to know what your goal is in that dating. And I think it's sad today that a lot of young women don't value themselves enough to realize that their company, their charm and their company is enough to pay for a dinner. That they often think if a man or a young man takes them to an expensive restaurant for dinner, they may owe him something. And I think that's sad, because that's really devaluing yourself. So,
well, our church does that where they don't call it like a group dating, but they'll do conventions that are co-ed, or we'll do outings. I serve in the for high school girls, and a lot of times we're doing combined outings so that they are learning to socialize with each other. It's not for them dating; it's just hanging out, and at least they're the same religion and they're the same culture, so they can really benefit. They can talk with one another, and you'll see the girls pairing up, and then you'll see them, mixing with the guys as well, making jokes and stuff. So I always think that's healthy. But I understand that what you were saying, like, oh, well, there's some kind of group dating where they're kind of pairing off. And,
well, you have to be on top of it. But,
right.
But when kids get to be like a junior, senior in high school, they are going to want to date. But, that can be done in a safe way if you've given them if you've already fairly confident you've instilled your values and your beliefs in your child. If you, and that child, young teen or older teen, is emotionally mature, because we have to have conversations about what could happen if a date goes bad, because we know that happens a lot. We know, I ran across a statistic the other day that 1 in 5 girls end up in an abusive relationship with some, and it happens just like the adult abusive relationships, where the guy is really nice at first and then gets aggressive with hitting, slapping, pushing, verbal abuse, and then maybe even pressure to have oral sex or sex. And so if we have to be able to have discussions about what to do if something goes wrong, because some young adults are very open to being easily influenced by peers, and others you just know they are strong and they're not going to do what they don't want to do. And I think it's important to stress that you don't want to. First sexual experiences, I know from doing sex therapy, are extremely important for both males and females, because they can cause dysfunction if they don't go right, or they can make it difficult to have a good, healthy, later adult sexual adjustment. And they don't have to be traumatic. They can just be negative, especially if they're repeated. They can just, so I think it's important to stress again, giving positive sexual messages, but talking about how that the goal is to make the first experience be wonderful, right? And so it's important that you decide, you determine when that happens and with who that happens, and if you are going to feel okay about it and have a good experience. And of course we want them to wait till marriage, and we can share with them why we want them to do that. It happens, it does happen. A lot of Christian girls and some even non-Christian girls are doing that. But we don't want to make them feel that if something happens and they have a sexual encounter, we don't want to shame them, right? We don't want to make them feel like they're ruined, because I've experienced Christian girls who have something like that happen and then feel like they're ruined and they're they can't go back. And that certainly is not the way to look at it, right? So messages about sex and sexuality are really important, and so often parents kind of mess that up.
Yeah, it's a hard conversation to have.
It is.
Ideally, you want them to be in a loving relationship
hard.
and wait till after they're married. But like you said, sin is sin, and if they make a mistake, the last thing you want is for them to think they're going to be shunned from the church and the community and all of that. So it's such a hard balance.
Yeah, or they've ruined their life forever. And it is hard for parents. So another option is maybe a mentor, because in Christian communities there are a lot of mentorships going on, an older woman or maybe even the right younger woman, a few years older. But someone has to talk about these things.
Right.
It's very interesting. So let's say that a boy and a girl are dating and they are contemplating marriage. What do you think are really important things that they should talk about? Maybe ensure that there are commonalities between them. Maybe things that you've seen have been issues when you have done your marriage counseling.
I think that premarital counseling is really important, and everybody should get it. Because sometimes young people or even older people coming in for premarital counseling, they already have discovered an issue, a serious issue or two. Or maybe they haven't, and if they haven't, it might be helpful for them to see it, to have a therapist help them see where they might have a struggle. Right.
So do you think they would need to go to a clinical therapist, or can they go to their priest, their father of confession? Can they go to?
I think that it depends on the person, right? Every therapist isn't necessarily going to do a great job, and every priest
of course.
But there are priests that are really comfortable and have a great relationship.
Right.
It's really about how the young adult feels. You have to feel, if you're going to talk about things like that, you have to feel comfortable with the person, and you can pick up if the person isn't comfortable themselves talking to you. You pick that up. So what should they talk about? Couples that have kind of decided that they'd like to get married, they should talk about everything. Their values, their beliefs, their goals, aspirations, dreams. They should share who they are to the best of their ability, because we're not always that self-aware when we're young. They should talk about their families and the more information that we know about our partner, the better partner we can really be. It's very helpful to understand your partner, to understand what makes them the way they are, maybe where they've got an issue and why they have that issue, and how you can help with that because I think in marriage we're going to do one of two things. We're going to come together and we're going to heal one another, because we're all wounded in childhood some way or other, even when you do the best job you can, or if you're not really wounded in childhood, you get wounded along the way, a school situation, a peer situation. It's just a wounded world.
It's a fallen world.
So if we come together and we don't heal one another, we're going to then continue wounding one another. You're going to push all the issues and and it's going to be bad. So I think that's the advantage of not getting into sex, but really just enjoying being together and having all these wonderful conversations.
Right.
And giving them a chance to develop that attraction and that chemistry and enjoy it and contemplate it, but really work on knowing one another and their friendship. And it's just a better way. I mean, everything that God designed is for the best for us. I mean, he created us. It's not, I say to girls, it's not like God is trying to take pleasure away from us. Just the opposite. He put it in the marital relationship simply because that's where we have commitment. And, it's safe in that, we have someone that loves us, we have commitment, we're not going to, or at least we're less likely to feel used or have a really bad experience. So God is saying, this is wonderful, this sexuality, but I want you to have the best experience. And as I said, that first experience is important. You don't want your daughter to have a negative one, particularly if she repeats it or if she doesn't talk to anybody about it and holds on to really a lot of negative feelings about it.
What would deal breakers be? What are some of the signs that, people who are thinking of getting married, what are some of the signs that they should say, I think this is a deal breaker. I don't think it's, while I was really enjoying getting to know this person, I'm starting to see things that, I don't think it'll work out in marriage. And what are some of the deal breakers? Or if the person says he doesn't want kids, or there's something else.
A book just popped into my mind. It's written by Townsend and Cloud. They're Christian psychologists, and the book is called Safe People. And it talks about how to find relationships that are good for you and avoid the ones that are not. So I'm trying to go back to some of the things he said, and one of them is, if you see somebody that is really, if you start to see somebody who is dishonest, that's a big one. Right. If someone, if you catch someone lying more than 2-3 times, then they have an issue. They're not honest, and you have to have that minimally, right? Another one is maybe if somebody is irresponsible. They're not going to be a responsible partner, right? They're not going to do their share. They're not going to live up to their share of what it takes to have a relationship. Irresponsible people are people maybe with no motivation, right? They have no goal for their life or no plans for how they're going to live their life. Right. Another one would be, obviously any kinds of substance abuse. Right. I think that it's important to check out pornography. I think it's important for women to ask at any age directly to a man, do you use pornography? What is your history of pornography? Hopefully he'll be honest, because pornography is destroying marriages by the thousands. I mean, it's impossible for any woman, I don't care if she's Marilyn Monroe, to compete with porn. It's addictive, it's progressive, and at its worst, a man can actually, I'm not saying every man, but at its worst, a man can actually lose desire and attraction for his partner. Because our sexuality, like I said, it's sensitive. It's a big deal. It isn't, people think they should be able to have sex with anyone under any circumstances, but that's not how we were designed, and that just causes problems, when we don't take it in a serious way.
That's like taking the emotion out of it, like you said. It's just like something.
It's going to be disappointing.
Exactly.
Someone is going to get hurt. Someone is going to feel used or not very positive about it. So who to avoid, any kind of substance abuse thing that you identify, well, pornography as well as an addiction, any kind of a person that has any addiction. You might want to think about anger. We all have anger, but if you can identify over time, getting to know someone, that they have really an anger issue, that could be a red flag that you would really say, oh, I don't know. Now, in that book that I mentioned, Safe People, it isn't when you read the book, I used to volunteer at Northland. They have a divorce healing program, and it's a very good program. I refer everybody going through a divorce that will go to it. But when you read that book and you're in a bad relationship or coming out of one, you go, now you see all these red flags of this person wasn't ever safe. But when you get a little more healthy and you read it again, you start to say, wow, in many ways I wasn't a safe person myself. I wasn't really a safe person. So a safe person isn't somebody that's perfect. A safe person, because God, when he brings people into our life, he's not bringing perfect people. And he's not saying, if you feel strongly that this is God's choice for you. It's not that he's saying, oh, you'll live happily ever after. Just the opposite. Sometimes God knows the struggles you're going to have as you stretch to meet one another's needs, and you're going to become whole by doing it, a better person. I mean, marriage and raising children is an antidote for selfishness and self-centeredness if you do it right? So, God knows all this.
It's about sacrificing on both sides, to your point.
Nothing like having kids to awaken that.
That's right.
Because I think parenting makes you very selfless.
It changes you immediately.
And it's sad to see parents that are selfish. Parents that are focused on other priorities while they're raising young children. It's sad to see, but it's common.
Happens, surprisingly,
So what would be some advice for newlyweds? Talking through all the things, let's say they've found their safe person and they're in this relationship. What would be some advice that you could give?
Well, say they found someone that they think is hopefully God's choice for them.
Yes, and
or
they're
somebody
married.
that they think they have a lot of compatibility with. I'll say something for you about we always want our children, to marry a believer. But I've seen a lot of Christian males and females marry a non-believer and convert them. And so how do we, that's when we get into trouble, when we try to judge other people as maybe being out of God's will when maybe that's something that, because God knows a person's heart, and what the Bible says he's looking to and from throughout the earth, looking for a heart that he can draw towards him. So, as a rule, I don't think that God is asking us to marry non-believers, but I think we have to recognize that there are exceptions to, and God is not somebody we can put in a box, right? And always is predictable.
Right.
And how he's relating to you might be very different than he's relating to me at the time, because we're at different places in our journey with God. So, I just thought I'd throw that out there. But say you've got your person that you think you're compatible with and is a good person. Hopefully it's very important that you bring that person around your family. And back to teenagers dating at 17 and 18, once they go to college, you have no control. So my philosophy is that you give a lot of early child guidance, and then instill those values and beliefs, but always encourage them to think and question ask them about their feelings. And then as they get older, I think you give them more freedom, not less, and more option to make some choices of their own and take responsibility for it, because that's what we're trying to do. So by the time they get to college, and a lot of times what I see happening is the opposite, that parents get sort of frantic when teenage years, and they try to really be controlling. And if you haven't developed a really comfortable, talking kind of relationship, it's the worst mistake you can make, because they will then pull away.
You're describing something called like funnel parenting, where it's very, when they're younger, it's more like you're tighter, and then as they get older, and you give them more responsibilities and freedoms, and then until they're, I guess, that college age where you're like, well, I hope I've given you enough. I'm going to still talk to you, but I'm going to trust you more. So it's like a funnel parenting. That's what that's how I'm seeing how you're describing it.
Yeah, because we're trying to raise adults. I mean, people not look at all the colleges and all the, there isn't a lot of encouragement to really think for yourself, right? In our world today, it's all programmed. And we don't really want to do that. We want to have discussions. We want to take advantage of object lessons or things that we, sometimes. I remember a situation with my younger daughter where she wanted to go somewhere, and I didn't think it was safe. And what I stressed to her was, I'm trying to protect you. It's protection, it's not control. And I think that if it's true, it's believable, if it's true. And so we had a discussion about what could happen in that situation. If you put yourself in that situation, what could happen? What would you do? And then ultimately I said, make the decision. Make the decision after we've talked about it and why. And I think that kids will, they can be reasonable when you have discussion. My youngest daughter also accused me of scaring her, because I hear all these stories. I hear so many girls that have horrible sexual experiences, and look at the amount of girls that are the whole sex
trade.
Yeah, trafficking.
And just the girls that are, it's not safe. I mean, we're Christians and we don't do this, but it's so unsafe for girls to go to a bar at night by themselves. They walk out, they've had a little bit to drink, and someone could be in the bar waiting all evening for that. So we have to be really careful, and you telling your older teens about the realities of the world. Like, don't be on your cell phone when you're coming out of the mall and you're walking to your car. Be aware. Don't be on your cell phone. Go out in a group. Don't go by yourself. Don't ever leave a girlfriend somewhere.
Right. Carry mace with you.
Wants to. Just talking about the realities and the stories that are in the news. She said it really scared her, but I think that was good.
My mom used to do that when I was young. She would say, this was on the news, someone was raped and someone was kidnapped and someone was whatever. And I couldn't go down the street for a while because she scared me to death. But then as I got older, I got a little bit wiser. I kind of understood what she was trying to say, and I was appreciative. But for a while, I was scared. But then I was like, no, I get it.
You don't want to scare the wits out of them, but you do want to talk about realities that can happen, because they're not thinking about it, because they are immature.
Right.
They're not really
and it's crazy, but we always talk about like making it age appropriate, but it's kind of sad. Like, we're kind of in another world now where age appropriate is unfortunately very young now, because those things can happen.
It is so difficult to raise children nowadays with Christian values, or for Christian parents, because the culture is so sick. I mean, even in my years of doing therapy, I've just witnessed it getting sicker and sicker. So people are so messed up, and yet we're trying to raise kids so countercultural today, that it's very challenging. The internet,
it's the culture, it's the schools. They've taken God out of everything, and so we're like aliens to people when we're talking about God or raising our children a certain way. It's almost like, what are you talking about? It's unheard of kind of thing. So it is difficult. It's a big challenge.
So being submissive, what does that really mean, or how does it look in a marriage?
I think that being a submissive wife does not mean being unequal in the relationship. It's a partnership, and we come into marriage with strengths and weaknesses, both of us, and we have to try to create that relationship. However, I do think that particularly Christians' wives, because Non-Christians, don't even have that concept. But as Christian wives, I think we should make every effort to respect our husbands, every effort. But I always am intrigued by the fact that if you look at where that is in Scripture, you see that right after that, men are told to love their wife, how? As God loved the church. So when I read that, I think right away about 1 Corinthians 13, where God defines love. Let's see, always patient, kind, trusting, right? Always hopeful, persevering, never keeping records of wrongdoing, right? On and on. So I think obviously a man or nobody can love with that kind of perfection, but it doesn't mean that it isn't a standard that we should try to achieve. So if you're in a marriage and your husband is really trying to love you in that way, it's pretty easy to be submissive. Right? Because submission when does it come up? It shouldn't be coming up over every issue. It comes up maybe in a crisis where somebody has to make an ultimate decision, right? That's when it comes up. Like, we've talked about it and maybe, we're talking about moving or not moving and we can't make a decision. Oh, time is up, we've got to make it. And maybe the husband says, I'm going to make that decision. It was never meant to be a day-to-day thing of you aren't a thinker and you have to surrender all your thoughts and feelings to me. It comes right. God is saying, respect your husband. And husbands, love your wife. Now we both need to be loved and we both need to be respected, but he's stressing that respect your husband, and isn't it easy if you're in a relationship, even if somebody, isn't always loving towards you, but in your heart of hearts, you know that your husband loves you. It's so much easier. That doesn't even become an issue. Right?
Right.
Because he knows that he's not treating you like you're not an equal partner. And you cannot have intimacy without the equality. If you have a one-up, one-down relationship, that's not an environment where intimacy, will thrive.
I know a lot of non-Christians like to use that verse against us. Oh, well, you're just a woman, you just need to be submissive, to kind of shut us up. I've actually been told that a few times. But it's almost like no one pays attention to the verse right before Ephesians 5:22. I think it's Ephesians 5:21 that says 5:22 is for women to submit to their husbands, but the verse right before it says to submit to each other. So everyone kind of blocks that out and is like, oh, well, a woman has to, be submissive. And I know every time the abunas always do it in the church, they pause because they hear the gasp from all these women on their side, like, whatever. But that has never been a problem for us because I think we know better. I think when it comes to marriage, the ideal way that, God made it, there was no inequality when he made Adam and Eve. It wasn't like one is higher than the other. They were equal. And for anyone to gasp now is because we understand the sense of inequality, not as husbands and wives, but as individuals. But you're no longer an individual when you're married. You become one, and so your egos have to kind of be put aside. And of course, as newlyweds and as people watching this, we're just like, because we're not thinking, as newlyweds, it's like, no, I want to be treated equal, and we will. But in the end, it's like we were talking about this, we become less selfish and more selfless as we become married and we have children. It starts to peak even higher as you have children, and it's no more about, oh, well, I'm submitting. It's just constant work, constant teaming together and realizing that it's not just like, oh, okay, I'm going to submit to him, whatever he says. It's more like, let's work together and get it right. We are equals, and
it's about mutual respect.
It is mutual respect.
It's mutual respect.
It's a divine love.
You said something too that was interesting. Like if you're having the submission conversation every day, something is wrong.
Right.
Listen, you're supposed to submit. Something is wrong.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
whenever it's I know my husband has the best interest for me, and we respect each other mutually, and God has commanded me to do this with love and my
Right.
husband respects me,
Yeah.
then it doesn't feel like submission, most likely.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
In a good Christian marriage, I don't think it's really an issue. But again, there are times when one person has to make the call. And I think in those times that you should allow your husband to maybe make a call, maybe on things like, are we going to sell this house and get a new one? You know,
Right.
not on every issue, but I think God, through the Holy Spirit, lets you know when that is, if you're walking with God.
Yeah.
I think you know when that is.
Well, thank you so much for clearing that up for us, Juan, and being here with us today. I really appreciate it.
It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We learned a lot.
Lots
Yeah,
of good
quite
questions.
convincing.
Lots of fun.
Well, tune in next time for another episode of The Grapevine. Bye.
Bye.